Okay, so next for part 2, talking about language. Okay, so they want you to talk about the first time you used a foreign language to communicate. Who did you communicate with? What did you say? What was the situation? How did you feel? This is quite a nice story because I think most people have got a sort of like a clear memory of a time they were trying to speak a foreign language to someone. So maybe it's not necessarily the first time, but again, this is one of those times where you can get creative, and just any memorable time when you tried to communicate, pretend that was like one of your first times. So for me, it's when I was in year 8, on a school trip to France, and I had to try and buy a ham baguette sandwich from a man in a French shop, and he didn't want to speak English to me. And it was like really sort of scary, and I felt so nervous and stupid and confused, and I was trying to be like, je voudrais un jambon baguette, s'il vous plaît, and he was just like, speak to me in English. And it was like kind of traumatizing. So that wasn't my first time ever trying to speak in a foreign language to someone, but that's my sort of a strong memory I have. So that's one of my recommendations for part 2, is just always focus on something you have a strong memory of when they want you to talk about an event, and don't worry whether it's true or not to what they want you to say. So let's see what this candidate says.
I remember that was when I was 11 years old in the US. At that time, I visited my aunt who lives in Delaware. And one day while my stay in there, she invited her neighbor, Walter, I still remember his name, to her house, and we were having a dinner together. But like I didn't say anything because I don't like, while they are speaking English, like I understood nothing, and then my aunt suddenly like talking to me and persuaded me to speak to that guy Walter in English, which I learned from my school back in Korea. And then, but I was too shy at the time. Like it was, my first conversation to the foreigner, and then I know what to say, but that's it. Like the only thing I could say was, "How are you?" So I asked him, "How are you?" And then my expected answer from him was, "I'm fine, thank you, and you," because that's what I learned from school. But instead of that, he said something else, like, "Oh, like recently we're doing fine, like and then what, and like the weather is good or something." So I was like kind of freaked out, like I don't know what to say because that was not my expected answer. So like I asked aunt, like what can I say, and then she kind of explained it, and then we laughed together. And yeah, that's my memory when I first used foreign language.
Okay, so that was a nicely told story. I would definitely say, in terms of fluency and pronunciation, very strong. Especially why I liked the fluency was that it was a very easy to follow story. He told it well with confidence, and he kept the story moving forward. There was a beginning, there was a middle, there was an end. Okay, and that helps you sound more competent. It helps you sound more fluent. If you're speaking with confidence and you're telling a good story, then that helps boost your score, just because you give the impression of being a better speaker than maybe you are. In terms of vocabulary, again, okay, kind of, but the thing is that his vocabulary that he chose to use was quite basic. And really, I think he can be using more native speaker-like phrases. And this doesn't mean like talking like a fancy textbook or a dictionary, but just being able to use the sort of like phrases like, I was so embarrassed, I thought I could die, or something like that. Or I was so embarrassed, I wish the ground would open up and swallow me, which is a couple of phrases that native speakers would use. I especially like the ones about, I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me. Okay, meaning that you just wish you could fall through the earth, which is something that's sort of like an idiomatic expression that they like you to use in IELTS. So I wanted to hear him use more of those because he's obviously a very confident speaker of English. In terms of vocabulary as well, I thought he missed out the chance to use more descriptive phrases. And especially sort of in terms of adjectives and things like that. I feel like he could, especially his feelings and how he felt and what Walter looked like or how his aunt looked at him, things like that, you can use more description. So like, Walter looked at me with such a kind expression, but I was too scared to notice. Okay, that's sort of some nice phrases he could have used, but he stuck to a more sort of basic level of telling the story. Then in terms of grammar, there was sort of one thing where he talked about, it was his first conversation to a foreigner, is the phrase he used, but obviously should have been with a foreigner. So it was the very first conversation with a foreigner. And then again, in terms of grammar, he's played very sort of safe with his grammar choices. Everything was in past simple. There was only one time where he used the phrase, we were having dinner when she invited Walter over. But everything was like, I didn't say anything. I visited my aunt. She invited Walter. I understood everything. So it was very past simple. So I wanted to see a much stronger range of grammar. Let's see what they do for question 2, which is about language. So do many people in your country learn a foreign language? Probably yes. And what age do you think is better for a person to begin to learn a new language? Okay, so 2 quite nice, straightforward questions. Let's see what this candidate does.
Well, for sure, my people, Korean people, are completely like into the foreign languages. Well, English is without saying. Like other languages like Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, French, they are like very, very like willing to learn all those languages, all because they just want to get into the better university and want to get a better jobs. I'm sure it might happen other side of the world too, but especially Korea, like they are far more crazy about it. What age do you think I think is better for person to begin? I think the younger the better, because as people getting older, the brain for the learning languages is getting kind of like fixed. So it like once you're grown up, it is really hard to put in the other languages in your brain. Of course you can, but it's getting harder. So just the younger the better. It means just what it is. Like you can maybe 2 years old, 3 years old. If you think it's too early, maybe 5 to 7 years old, I think is appropriate age to start other languages. Yeah.
Okay, so again, in terms of fluency and pronunciation, good. He used some nice sort of like intonation features during his speech. You can tell that he's either studied abroad or lived abroad for a little bit, as he has a confident accent. He was a little bit hesitant giving his answer, or sort of transitions. There was a couple of pauses. So again, that's just practice, okay? The more he practices, that when you walk into the test center, you've got to sort of sell it a little bit. You can't just be sort of like shy. The more confidently you speak to the examiner, the more friendly you are. Like, I know IELTS examiners aren't really friendly and they sit there and they cut you off and they go like, next question. Okay, but the more you've got to kind of sell yourself, be confident, because your confidence actually makes you seem like a more competent native speaker than you are. Okay, I can't tell you how many students I have who sort of shyly sit there and sort of mumble and speak a little bit. And then suddenly one day I have a real conversation with them and I'm like, oh my God, you speak good English. And it's because they're shy. You create this impression that you're not as good, okay? So one of my top tips for IELTS students is you got to be confident, smile, speak, the more you speak confidently, the more, like the higher your fluency and pronunciation score is going to be, because you come across as more fluent. His vocabulary was good. He used a lot of very nice natural phrases, okay? So he said like things like, for sure, people in Korea like to learn foreign languages, okay? That's a really great phrase, meaning definitely. Like, do you want to go to the beach next week? For sure, I want to go to the beach, okay? Like, use something is like absolutely true. He says like, oh, Koreans, they're completely into foreign language. Using the word into for meaning that you like something is a nice native phrase. He says it goes without saying that people like to learn English. That's a really nice natural phrase. You can use it in lots of different situations. It goes without saying that I'm excited to go to my friend's wedding tomorrow. So something it doesn't need to be said because it's so obvious and true. And I also really liked about learning language, he said, the younger the better, which is a nice sort of natural idiomatic phrase that native speakers use. So it's better, the younger you start, the better it is. The younger, the better. And again, I thought his grammar was again, it was accurate, but again, slightly sort of safe in terms of the range of what he's showing me, okay? So the accuracy is good, but he's not showing me things like conditionals, like if, could, maybe, different tenses, show me like especially when you're referring to things in the past, compare to the present. You can compare, use a couple more comparing phrases. So that kind of thing would make his grammar score a bit better. But in terms of pronunciation, I thought was great. We're definitely up there in the sort of 6.5. In terms of vocabulary, I would say up there in sort of the 7 band range because he uses lots of really nice phrases, especially in that second part of his answer. In terms of accuracy, good. In terms of range, limited. Okay, so sticking him down there in that sort of 6.0 category. Fluency and coherence, great. I would sort of want to put him up in the 7 category. So I think overall he's probably pulling out at a 6.5, but a very strong 6.5. And if you can just show me more advanced grammar techniques and speak with a little bit more confidence in that sort of second section, then I think for sure this candidate should be pushing for a 7.0 speaking. But I would say definitely a comfortable 6.5.